Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I wanted to do a follow-up video on the whole Pentagon Leaks situation. I did a live stream a few days ago as this whole thing was breaking. I think it was on the 13th, so maybe like 1 or 2 days ago. And we were just covering it and kind of asking the question, is the entire thing a psyop? You know, we were looking at the Washington Post article about the so-called Discord files, and this 21-year-old Jack Teixeira, hopefully I'm pronouncing his last name right, being, you know, a so-called like gamer, and posting this stuff to kind of like win an argument online. You know, we were asking the question, are the documents even real? Number one, is this whole thing a psyop? Is it a distraction? Is it real? There's many different possibilities here, and I think that there's something very strange about this whole thing where it almost seems to on the nose, if you know what I mean. It all just seems a little too perfect, right? I don't know. But you know, as we say, we like to dig deeper, don't we? Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll talk a little bit more about this whole thing. I've gathered some information that and some clips that I think that you guys might find very helpful, but we're going to kind of ask the same questions of like, what's really going on here? Because as you all know, the fog of war is real, right? Wartime propaganda is real. And, you know, anyways, so there could be a lot more to the story here. The first thing I want to bring up is, you know, here, just to give you another idea of like how young this guy really is. Here's a picture of him. And I wanted to include a picture of how the FBI rolled up on this kid, you know, because this is the kind of thing that they do now. We talk about like the problem of militarized law enforcement and police. Well, the FBI, when they really want to make a scene, they roll up on people with like tanks now, and they'll have a helicopter flying overhead with a hostage, you know, task force, a negotiation team and a SWAT team. You know, they'll bring people from local law enforcement. They'll bring DHS components. You know, they turn this whole thing into like a big production there. You know, that vehicle, it looks like something they would use for like crowd control or something. It's just heavy-handed. It isn't necessary. They probably could have spoken to this guy's parents and they could have just turned him in to his local FBI field office, but they're choosing to make a theatrical production of it, which is a red flag that there's an agenda here. And I just wanted to include, I found this about his last name. Teixeira is a Brazilian Portuguese. It's a surname of a Portuguese family with toponymic roots, whose origins is in the landlord of Teixeira municipality in Portugal. So I thought that was kind of interesting. This is our white supremacist, you know, whatever. Unreal. I saw this meme. I thought this was kind of funny. For those wondering if the Ukraine war files were real, here is your answer. That's a very good point. Maybe. It's not to say that the documents hadn't been altered, because clearly they had been, but there could be a lot of things going on here though. And so let's just keep that in mind, but it is a good point, I think. I thought this meme was funny too, just to highlight, you know, the consistent logic here. Vindman is a hero and he is honorable, even, you know, despite his family working for Ukrainian organized crime. And then we have Mr. Teixeira here. He leaked classified documents about Ukraine, but it didn't serve our narrative and our political agenda. So he's bad now. He's bad guy. And the thing is that we don't really know anything about this young man. You know, everything that we're getting is we're hearing things from people that were in his Discord server. Well, guess what, guys? I've learned firsthand that Discord servers, you know, chat logs and all of that can be altered. They can be photoshopped. So, you know, the Discord username was Luca. So just keep that in mind. Like, there's no we have not been presented with any evidence that has shown us that this guy did this. He could just be a patsy. He could be the fall guy, right? Or this could be some kind of operation. You know, this was him right before the FBI rolled up and arrested him. He's sitting there just kind of like reading something. I'd be interested to know what book he was reading, but I wanted to include this little snippet here about Operation Mincemeat. Operation Mincemeat was a successful British deception operation of the Second World War to disguise the 1943 Allied invasion of Sicily. Two members of the British intelligence obtained the body of Glyndor Michael, a tramp, I think that means like homeless alcoholic person or someone of ill repute, who died from eating rat poison, dressed him as an officer of the Royal Marines and placed personal items on him, identifying him as the fictitious Captain William Martin. Correspondence between two British generals that suggested the Allies planned to invade Greece and Sardinia, with Sicily as merely the target of a feint, was also placed on the body. So it was a tactical deception operation. It could be something similar going on here with the documents being leaked and what they say, right? It could be something to try to fool Russia. I mean, we really don't know. That's the point. Or, you know, this guy, he could be legit, just like our rock. I had to get a Black Lagoon reference in the video, so, you know. I do feel like this little kitten, though. I wake up, there's another psyop. I go to sleep, I wake up, there's another one. That's
late last week, leaked intelligence about the warning.
Feels. Okay, so now we're going to start going to some clips where, they're discussing the whole thing. This was Tucker Carlson. Tucker here is discussing this and what the documents themselves reveal, because, you know, honestly, we should be more focused on the contents of the documents and if they're legitimate and what that means versus who they're coming from and what that person's motivation for leaking them might be. I mean, if what they say is true, then isn't that what matters?
Ukraine began to appear on social media. Briefing slides prepared by the U.S. government began to show up, among other places, on Twitter. And the slides show that this is, in fact, not Ukraine's war. It's our war. The United States is a direct combatant in a war against Russia.
Yes, this is true. I think there was a journalist, I believe it was Whitney Webb, who she wrote an article, and the article basically had gathered all this information from all these prior articles dating back to like 2014 that showed that the CIA had been training like the Ukrainian intelligence services, and they were training people, though, basically, and kind of like preparing for something like this. So it goes back a long way. And yes, of course, you know, this is a proxy conflict, if you will.
As we speak, American soldiers are fighting Russian soldiers. So this is not a regional conflict in Eastern Europe. This is a hot war between the two primary nuclear superpowers on Earth.
That's a big deal, right? Like, hey, this could be a World War III type situation. And we've had not just US, but Russia as well, talking about using tactical nukes. It's a very concerning situation, I would say.
And yet this war has never been formally declared. It has not been authorized by Congress. And for that reason, this war is a violation of American law. It is a crime. The second thing we learned from these slides.
Well, and what does it also mean, too, about the Ukrainian war crimes, you know, and who's ultimately responsible for that, right? What does that mean for the American people? And, you know, that's not to say that Russia hasn't committed war crimes as well. I'm sure they have, but that's not the point.
Is that despite direct U.S. involvement, Ukraine is in fact losing the war.
Oof.
7 Ukrainians are being killed for every Russian. Ukrainian air defenses have been utterly degraded.
So that's, I think it's important that, hey, if we're ultimately funding this and we're a direct participant in our government and they're supposed to represent us, don't you think we have a right to know the truth about the situation? I think we do. And I find it very amusing that the leftists and the mainstream media are running around calling Mr. Teixeira a traitor, and saying all this nasty stuff about him, like, oh, how dare he do this? Shouldn't they be praising him? Like, don't you think that their job as journalists would be to want some kind of accountability and transparency from the government? Aren't they supposed to, speak truth to power or something? Yeah, that's right. They don't, and we all know it.
Ukraine is losing. The Biden administration is perfectly aware of this. They're panicked about it, but they have lied about this fact to the public. Just 2 weeks ago, for example, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin told the U.S. Senate that Russian military power is, quote, waning. In other words, Russia is losing the war. That was a lie. He knew it was when he said it, but he repeated it in congressional testimony.
And he's not going to, be charged with perjury. No one's going to be held accountable, and they know it. So they lie with impunity. It's just remarkable. Truly it is.
That is a crime. But Lloyd Austin has not been arrested for committing that crime. Instead, the only man who has been taken into custody, or likely ever will be, is a 21-year-old Massachusetts Air National Guardsman who leaked the slides that showed that Lloyd Austin was lying.
Yes, isn't that interesting how that works? How that whole thing works?
Because the goal is not.
And I wanted to include this because it is very poignant, how many years later. I think this clip is from 2011, Julian Assange talking about the Afghanistan conflict.
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan, and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
An endless war, not a successful war. So maybe that's why they're trying to extradite Julian Assange, and even tried to, plot to assassinate him. Look up Mike Pompeo when he was head of the CIA in 2017, Sheldon Adelson, UC Global. It's a very bizarre, disturbing, cautionary tale. A tale of corruption. Also, let's be real. Jonathan Pollard, who compromised nuclear secrets, made Alaya, flew on Sheldon Adelson's private jet from America to Israel, where he was met by Bibi on the tarmac, and he kissed the ground, and they bumped elbows as they stood there wearing masks. Yet Jonathan Pollard was supposed to be one of the most damaging actual traitors to our country, providing classified intelligence, not just to one country, but to multiple countries for money. He was getting paid to do that. He was working for one country in the Middle East in particular. So look up the Pollard affair. He only spent, 20 years in prison, maybe a little more than that. And then he was freed, and he was sent back to the country he was working for. And by the way, those nuclear secrets that Pollard leaked made their way to China, of course. So there's that. Let's be real.
A new video that has just come in to Fox News. The young man that you're looking at with his hands behind his head, walking slowly backwards, is Jack Teixeira at his home, outside his home, we believe, in Massachusetts. So this.
He literally looks like a child.
This is when he was taken into custody. You can see the heavily armored vehicle, and you can see him slowly walking backwards in red shorts and a gray T-shirt, as this 21-year-old who led this group online was able to access.
And so what if the agenda here is about censorship? You know, we've already saw the media asking the Biden regime, what are we going to do, you know, about monitoring Discord more and places like that. We have the Restrict Act, which many people are calling a Patriot Act 2.0. What is the real bigger picture here? I think we all know there is one.
The highest security documents in American intelligence, military intelligence, and then was able to pass it around to his friends. So an extraordinary scene here this afternoon in this breaking news.
An extraordinary scene this afternoon. Okay, so here we can see him backing up slowly. This is a different camera angle at his, you know, I believe this is his family's home in Massachusetts. And they, you know, they're acting like this is some big, dangerous, scary guy. You know, like his mom could have just brought him to his local field office with no problems. But they like to make an example of people if this is real and legitimate and it's not a total glow up. Yeah, they like to make examples of people. They like to make it theatrical so they can drum up whatever reaction they're hoping to achieve with this. You know, it could be one of those problem, reaction, solution type things. We're going to get into some stuff and some theories in a minute here. I just wanted to play, though, some clips of this young man's parents and the way that the media treats people, how the media hounds people, and just how disrespectful and gross and disgusting the media is. I'd like to play it for that reason alone. Remember that they're not real journalists. They're activists, and they work for the security state. They just pose as journalists. That's not what they are, though. They're not interested in truth.
Is this just a dumb mistake for the kid?
He said, I love you to your son is short. Would you like to say now?
They're so shameless, by the way. Shameless.
How is your son doing?
These people obviously don't want to speak to them.
Guys, can you stop touching
This
me?
is their son, you know? And they just swarm them like a hive, like a pack of vultures, hyenas, you know, like vampires.
What do you think he was trying to accomplish?
What do you think your son was trying to accomplish? Oh.
How are you feeling about the charges?
Who asks stuff like this? Like, honestly, how do you think they eat? What? How do you think they feel? This is their child. My goodness. You know, imagine this too, that like you're just like you're a regular, you know, I guess I'm presuming that the parents are boomers. You know, you're just like a boomer couple living your life, and the next minute, like, you're thrust into the national spotlight like this, and you have these vultures, the den of vipers surrounding you, hissing, all hissing. You know, then you've got this other guy who's like, you know, ranting about Joe Biden and the deep state. I don't know. It just, the whole thing is so strange. I don't really know what to make of it. I just, you know, I can't stand the mainstream media, so I always have to call them out. And they're just following these people. They're just trying to make their way to the courthouse so they can be there to, like, support their kid. and they just can't leave him alone. They gotta shove cameras and microphones and phones in their face and try to give him business cards. Lady, he doesn't want your business card. You know, like, leave the guy alone.
What do you want us to know about your son?
These are the same people who identified him to law enforcement. Oh, what do you want to say about your son who we doxed and exposed? You know, like, and who we're all calling a traitor and all this other crap. How do you feel about, you know, it's just, wow. It's unbelievable. And you know what? Good on them for just ignoring these people. Because I don't know if I would have been able to ignore them. I might have gone off, you know, and told them, you guys are gross, you know. Just unreal. And of course, the mainstream media was, oh, we're just doing our jobs. We're just doing our jobs. No, you're not.
Last 2 years with this guy.
All right, let's move on. We've got our final clip.
Joe Biden fault.
I don't believe you're what the
I don't think you believe it either, lady. This is fake news.
This guy's kind of funny.
You were reporting on this the last 2 years.
The blogger in the background there, or vlogger. He really doesn't like Joe Biden. So anyways, yeah, these are the kids' parents though. So I wanted to include that in my video about this. All right, so now let's go to some posts I have here, just, you know, pointing out that this is the kid, Jack Teixeira, 21-year-old Air National Guardsman, has been identified as the leaker of the classified intelligence documents. He was on the Discord server, quote unquote, Thug Shaker Central, that the media is already making out to be WS, that word. The incels, you know, they always flag words like that. Apparently that'll get you on an FBI watch list now too. So moving on, there's an article from Red State. How did Jack Teixeira gain access to the documents he leaked, and why were MSM stories about him stealth edited? That's a good question. Now, I want to point out this article was published on the 13th. Today is the 15th, so there might be more information, or things might have changed a little bit. But let's go through this. And by the way, just to let everybody know, Bobo is not leaving me alone. And I keep putting her down, and then she just jumps right back up here. So I'm trying to work. Let me work, cat. If you have cats, you'll know. You'll get it. The big story Thursday was the arrest of 21-year-old Jack Teixeira, dang it, Bobo, a member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, who allegedly leaked more than 100 pages of classified documents that exposed extremely sensitive information from the Pentagon regarding Ukraine, Russia, China, Israel, and the documents produced by the CIA and NSA. That story changed markedly through the day, though, and the sparse information we have about Teixeira raised major questions about how he could have possibly had access to such a wide-ranging tranche of information. Why what was finally reported as the true story was so different from what had been published earlier, and who was pushing the disinformation. In addition, the way it all went down with the New York Times beating the FBI to Teixeira. Yeah, that's very strange, right? Raised eyebrows, especially given that they were the first outlet to report on the leak just a week ago. Who was the source for the stories? That is a really good question. But I would also like to point out that these publications like the New York Times, NBC News, it's the mainstream media, they will devote months of time, resources, manpower to identifying and doxing somebody named Pepe McTendies 89 on Twitter. So they can ruin his life and like get him fired from his job. Like they will spend that much time just trying to dox regular people. That's literally what they do for a living. And then they try to agitate to get these people deplatformed everywhere, debanked, etc. So, there's nothing strange about the Times beating the feds to it. But it was probably the feds that gave the Times the information anyways. So, hello, when the story first appeared, Reuters claimed, based on anonymous sources, that Russia was behind it. Oh, and some of these folks are still saying that. We'll get to that in a minute. Russia or pro-Russian elements are likely behind the leak of several classified U.S. military documents posted on social media that offer a partial, month-old snapshot of the war in Ukraine. 3 U.S. officials told Reuters Friday. 3 U.S. officials. The documents appear to have been altered to lower the number of casualties suffered by Russian forces, the U.S. officials said, adding their assessments were informal and separate from an investigation into the leak itself. For days after that, there was no real speculation until the Washington Post published an exclusive interview Wednesday night with a teenage boy who was part of the Discord server where the documents were posted. The teenager said that the leaker went by the screen name OG, although we saw screenshots that said Luca, and that he was probably in his mid-20s in the military and worked on a military base. Despite reports Thursday morning that the leaker worked at Fort Bragg, it turns out Teixeira worked at Otis Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts. Otis is located on Joint Base Cape Cod and is home of the 102nd Intelligence Wing. So we will get to some of these so-called disinformation researchers and activists who are pushing disinformation even still right now today. Teixeira is an airman first class, and his job title is Cyber Transport Systems Journeyman, working with IT infrastructure, not analyzing intelligence. According to Jennifer Griffin at Fox News, he has a TS/SCI security clearance. Obviously, he would have access to classified information and documents given his job. But there are documents in the leak that someone in his position should not have had. Mere possession of a security clearance doesn't equal legal access to all documents and information that exist at that level of classification. He also would have needed to know the information to perform his job duties. So there's another very glaring red flag in all of this, if that is true. And I don't know, and I'm asking you all and making a video about this because I've heard kind of conflicting stories. I've heard from some people I know, who were in the military or whatever, that it's very easy and common for people that young to have access to that information. If they're doing intelligence analysis, they're able to pull from multiple sources. But if he wasn't an analyst, then I don't know. So it's all very kind of confusing. As I referenced earlier, the Wall Street Journal reported Thursday morning investigators believed that the leaker was based at Fort Bragg at the time of the leak. Very interesting, because if you're familiar with the reporting of myself and others like Seth Harp, there's some weird stuff that goes on at Fort Bragg. We'll just leave it at that. After the Pentagon briefing and arrest, the story was significantly changed from the original. Quote, investigators believe the leak purported highly classified documents on Ukraine and dozens of other subjects likely originated from an Air National Guardsman who was based at Fort Bragg at the time of the leak. U.S. officials said an arrest could be made as early as Thursday, unquote. The so-called updated story made no reference to Fort Bragg, nor was there any note that significant changes have been made to the story. So they're just stealth editing it and not telling people they're changing it. Why? Where did the Fort Bragg info come from? What U.S. official said that this person was at Fort Bragg and then changed it? And why did they change it? Curiously, an NBC News story about the imminent arrest and then the actual arrest was changed several times. The initial story read, quote, officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss an ongoing investigation said officials have been tracking Teixeira for some time and that an arrest is imminent. Officials who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss an ongoing investigation said that officials have been tracking Teixeira for some time. An arrest is imminent. The next version omitted Teixeira's name and changed the characterization from tracking to on to him. Quote, officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss an ongoing investigation said they've been on to him for some time and that an arrest is imminent. So they've been tracking him. They've been on to him. Interesting. Who told NBC News they'd been tracking him for some time? NBC claims that the sources were part of the investigation. Was it an FBI source or a Pentagon source? These questions need to be answered exactly. More than an hour after the arrest, Gordon Lawson, a former Navy officer who was assigned to the DIA, referenced Teixeira working at Fort Bragg in an appearance with Neil Cavuto. Oh, gee, might that be the source? He said, quote, especially if you're in an intelligence role, you're in that secure facility and you may have access to those computer systems. Now, I think this one had some human source intelligence that was well beyond what someone of this rank and responsibility should have. That could have been due to where he was assigned. I believe he was at Fort Bragg, which obviously has some sensitive commands there with Special Operations Command. Meanwhile, the Fayetteville Observer reports Fort Bragg officials stated Teixeira never worked at Fort Bragg and was never affiliated with any unit on Fort Bragg, which houses the Joint Special Operations Command. Who was telling the Wall Street Journal that Teixeira had a connection to Fort Bragg? In this case, it doesn't really matter, given the unit Teixeira was attached to. But Wall Street Journal has deep connections in the military intelligence community and doesn't generally publish information that is so easily and quickly disproven. Who was telling Reuters that Russia was behind the leak? And why? The changing stories with no acknowledgement of or explanation for the changes are likely part of an effort to distract from the elephant in the room. When reporters repeatedly confronted the Pentagon spokesperson with questions about how a 21-year-old low-level enlisted airman had access to the scope of information he apparently had access to, and how he could get more than 100 documents out of a skiff, he answered by saying that they're examining information distribution lists, and that they had the rules in place and Teixeira broke the rules, so they shouldn't be held responsible. That's unacceptable. As Mark Thyssen said, quote, the incompetence is stunning. Quote, the idea that a 21-year-old kid can expose sources and methods of how we spy, how we have penetrated the Chinese People's Liberation Army, because apparently we've exposed the fact we know they have a new hypersonic missile that can reach the U.S., that they exposed our penetration of the Russian Defense Ministry, that could affect the war. I mean, the incompetence is stunning. And Sean Duffy wondered if anyone in the command structure will be disciplined. What general is going to lose their job? Which general is at fault for national security to make sure you can't breach into the Pentagon and get this highly classified information? The problem with this administration is no one is held accountable. Someone has to lose their job. I mean, again, this guy should go to prison, but we have we have real problems in the Pentagon. I don't think the administration wants to look inside to go, who is the problem? Who else do we have to bring in to make sure our secrets are safe? A possibility that needs to be considered is that Teixeira was given many of the documents by someone else who did have access to them and who wanted them to be leaked. Former congressional candidate Joe Kent, a combat veteran himself, made some points on Twitter that we should all be paying attention to, which journalists should keep in mind more often. Kent wrote, quote, "The most important part of evaluating a source is to determine their access. How do they know what they know? If they can't plausibly explain it and prove it, but they are giving you good intel, it's being given to you for a reason. A cyber transport systems techie 3 is not given access to sensitive information pertaining to NATO partners, Israel, etc., even with a top secret clearance. The JCS docs maybe, but that too is a stretch. Teixeira needs to explain how he obtained the leaked information step by step. There's either much more to the story or we have major holes in our systems. Post Manning Snowden, I find that hard to believe, based on my time in the intel community. I'm not saying Teixeira is innocent. He likely leaked something, but how did he get a hold of information that is highly sensitive and compartmentalized? The media's manhunt, the Washington Post's intel mouthpiece Shane Harris of Russian bounties fame breaking the story also leads me to question the narrative, and people like Natasha Bertrand, etc. Yes, Teixeira needs to explain exactly how he obtained the information, but investigators should be able to figure that out with his cooperation by examining data already possessed by DOJ, FBI, DOD, and our various intelligence agencies, in addition to his devices. What is the likelihood that we, the American public, will ever know how he got the information? I'm not going to hold my breath, but a lack of full transparency means we destroy any remnants of confidence in our military leadership and intel community that remain. I don't think that there's a whole lot of confidence in either of those communities, just saying. Moving on. I think this is a very good point. NBC News says exclusive. The Biden administration is looking at expanding how it monitors social media sites and chat rooms after U.S. intelligence failed to realize classified Pentagon documents circulated online for weeks. Officials briefed on the matter say, Gonzalo Lira says, this is why they're setting up Jack Teixeira as the patsy for the leak to justify online repression and censorship. I think that's a very good point. Now, moving on to Moon of Alabama. And I, by the way, just so everybody knows, I will include the links for every single source in the video description. So if there's anything here you want to share or you want to look into more, always check the video description. I usually include the links for all of my sources. Leaks pinned on Russia and other issues with them. Exactly 1 week ago, the British news agency Reuters published the quote-unquote report below, which was then widely republished by other news sites. Russia likely behind U.S. military document leak, officials say. This was the story. 3 U.S. officials, as we covered, the author, Phil Stewart, has reported from more than 60 countries. Phil has appeared on blah, 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 award-winning national security. Blah. One wonders who initiated the contact between Stewart and those officials, quote unquote. Did Stewart ask them for comment, or did they call him to plant the nonsense? I've tried to contact Phil Stewart, but it is unlikely I will hear back from him. One wonders how many other such Russiagate-like hoax stories based on anonymous officials were published by Phil Stewart and Reuters. Meanwhile, one of the real purposes of the leak becomes clear. Continue reading. Leaks pinned on Russia and other issues with them. When media reported on the first batch of quote-unquote leaked Pentagon briefing slides, they also published pictures of the originals. Then came a second round, which conveniently was more about bashing Russia than on the releases itself. Those leaks were labeled as new or from a previously unknown source. Among those stories were no Russia-Ukraine peace talks expected this year, U.S. leak shows. Negotiations to end the conflict are unlikely during 2023 in all considered scenarios. The document says, which has not been disclosed previously, and that's what you're supposed to see, blah, blah, blah. Leaked U.S. intel, Russia operatives claim new ties with UAE. We covered that on the live stream that I did when we were first going over this. U.S. spies caught Russian intel officers boasting that they had convinced oil-rich UAE to work together against U.S. and UK intelligence agencies. The document viewed by the AP included an item citing research from March 9 with the title Russia/UAE Intel Relationship Deepening. The slides I have seen so far are from late February and the first days of March. A March 9 document is new. New leaked documents show broad infighting among Russian officials. The additional documents, which did not surface in a 53-page set that came to wide public attention online last week, paint a picture of the Russian government feuding over the count of the dead and wounded in the war, with domestic intel agency accusing the military of obscuring the scale of casualties Russia suffered. The new batch, which contains 27 pages, reinforces how deeply American spy agencies have penetrated nearly every aspect of the Russian intel apparatus and military command structure. Wow, how convenient. The piece is bylined by Bellingcat's Eric Toller. Now, Bellingcat, of course, is funded by Western intelligence agencies. They are NATO-backed, and the CIA loves them. There is no explanation where the quote-unquote original documents are coming from or how they were found. Hello? U.S. thinks UN chief too accommodating to Moscow. Leaked files suggest, BBC, April 13th, fresh revelations from a leak of secret documents. I am also curious about the selective reporting of a second stash of documents by mainstream media. This looks to me like someone is now piecemeal feeding additional quote-unquote intelligence to various outlets. Each runs a different story. If this is from a common stash, how come these outlets seem to have coordinated on who is taking what briefing slide? No pictures of the underlying briefing slides has appeared in the second round of quote-unquote leaks. Now the Washington Post claims to have lots of information about the person that quote-unquote leaked the first stash of the Pentagon briefing slides. Yeah. All right, so there's a lot of questions about the whole thing. Moving on. Russia says China agreed to secretly provide weapons. Leaked documents show. Isn't that convenient? And here we have the CIA. Oh no, I just dropped this super secret set of documents. Whoops, I'm so clumsy. Top secret, Russia and China, bad. That's so funny. Last month, a trove of top secret Pentagon documents ostensibly leaked on social media. Far from being embarrassing, the leak has all the hallmarks of being a deliberate disinformation operation by the U.S. We covered that prior thread in the live stream I did on this previously. We have a Twitter user saying, here's my conspiracy theory of the day. The leaked documents about Ukraine plan are fake. The 21-year-old kid is just a pawn. The real objective of this staged drama: A, mislead Russians about war plans. B, more importantly, pass all kinds of censorship and monitoring laws regarding U.S. social media and the Internet. Patriot Act on steroids. This is needed as the empire slowly collapses and faces the possibility of chaos and civil war. I think that's a really good point. This staged leak, oops, I did it again, is so laughable that a Russian embassy tweeted this meme below. However, thanks to Operation Mockingbird, all the mainstream media will use these secret documents, quote unquote, to brainwash the masses about Russia, China, the need for censorship, or any other talking point. It says, top secret, please, Putin, don't look. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of funny. And that's the meme that Russia tweeted about this whole thing. So I think there's a really good point to make here that it could be nonsense. Glenn Greenwald says the same establishment playbook is used to malign the character of leakers and distract attention from the substance of the revelations themselves. So they go into the media's treatment of the young kid, Jack Teixeira. On a virtually daily basis, one can find authorized leaks in New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, NBC, meaning stories dressed up as leaks from anonymous sources that are in fact nothing more than messaging assertions that CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, and the Pentagon have instructed these subservient corporations to disseminate. When that happens, the leaker is never found or punished, even when the leaks are are designated as the most serious crimes under the U.S. Criminal Code, such as when the Washington Post longtime CIA spokesman David Ignatius in early 2017 published the contents of the intercepted phone calls between Trump's incoming NSA National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Most of Russiagate was constructed based on authorized leaks, a generous way of describing official propaganda from the security state laundered in the American corporate press. But when it comes to unauthorized leaks, which result in the disclosure of secret evidence showing the U.S. security state lied, acted corruptly, or broke laws, that is when the full weight of establishment power comes crashing down on the head of the leaker. They are found and arrested, their character destroyed. And now, in a new and genuinely shocking escalation, it is the largest media corporations themselves that actually do the FBI's work by hunting down the leaker, exposing him, and ensuring his arrest. This playback is always used in such cases and easily recognized. The point is to shift attention from the substance of the embarrassing and incriminating disclosures onto the personal traits of the person who exposed them, so as to make the public forget about what they learned and come to see the leaker as so unlikable that they want nothing to do with the disclosures themselves. Thus, when Daniel Ellsberg leaked the Pentagon Papers showing the government was lying to the American public that it believed it could win the war in Vietnam, FBI and CIA agents broke into the office of his psychoanalyst to try to expose his psychosexual secrets to discredit him and distract from the substance of the disclosures. When Bradley Manning leaked massive evidence of hidden war crimes to WikiLeaks, longtime anti-LGBT bigot Joy Reid and others said the overarching motive was mental illness over gender identity. When it became clear Assange had created a powerful and formidable instrument for holding the security state accountable and exposing their lies and crimes, WikiLeaks, corporate outlets began puking up a deluge of personal attacks against him, ones designed to make people conclude he is so repellent the disclosures he enabled should be ignored because he was just too personally distasteful. The then editor-in-chief of the New York Times, Bill Keller, even stooped to demeaning his personal hygiene, publishing this 2011 paragraph that he said he received from one of his reporters. Quote, "He was alert but disheveled, like a bag lady walking in off the street, wearing a dirty light-colored sport coat and cargo pants, dirty white shirt, beat-up sneakers, and filthy white socks that collapsed around his ankles. He smelled as if he hadn't bathed in days." Lovely. When Snowden furnished to myself and Laura Poitras the previously secret evidence Obama's national security official James Clapper lied to the public, denying the NSA spied en masse on millions of Americans, the CNN and New York Times, NBC, Jeffrey Toobin labeled him a narcissist for believing he knew better than anyone else. And numerous outlets dug through his old blog comments to prove he had bad politics as a teenager. Yeah, well, there's still questions about Snowden. We'll just say that. Now, when doing the FBI's work by outing Jack Teixeira, both the Washington Post and CNN are emphasizing transgressive comments he made in a teenager's gaming room to distract attention from the lies these documents reveal about, among other things, Biden's role in Ukraine. Indeed. Okay, so moving on. You guys get the point. Look what's going on here. First, the New York Times, jointly with CIA front Bellingcat and Washington Post, hunted down, exposed, and ensured the arrest of a 21-year-old. Now they're having a party with the documents, publishing one exclusive after the next as if they bravely, quote-unquote, obtained them. Wow. And this is just so convenient for the U.S., military-industrial complex. Taiwan, highly vulnerable to a Chinese air attack. Leaked documents show, well, we better start World War III over that. I mean, what? It's just amazing. This is really starting to feel like a CIA planned cover. This is a quote from the article in their source. Quote, Vaki admitted to retweeting racist memes. There's no point hiding it. He said, I'm not a good person. Right. That is kind of funny. It's so ridiculous. 4 choppers for Jack Teixeira. The leaker busters at the deep state media worked overtime to catch Jack and falsely smear him as a guy who likes those kinds of memes. Without Jack, we wouldn't know. The US government lied about Ukraine because the media is working for the government now. And that is kind of an amazing picture, though, isn't it? Wow. Here we've got Jim Stewartson. He has a Ukrainian flag in his Twitter profile here and refers to himself as an anti-disinformation activist. This man is a mentally ill conspiracy theorist who is a paid propagandist, most likely on behalf of intelligence communities. He says the speed and ferocity of the psyop to paint Jack Teixeira as a quote-unquote whistleblower who was trying to save the world is very stark. Some have painted him as just a gamer trying to impress friends. No, he leaked documents to Russians from Fort Bragg, head of Army PSYOPs. He was not at Fort Bragg, and he wasn't giving documents to Russians. These people lie while calling themselves anti-disinformation activists. I mean, unbelievable. What a doofus. He says, and he's got it highlighted, the group contained foreign citizens, including from Russia and Ukraine. Oh, he's leaking to the Russians from Fort Bragg. Oh yeah, he's not at Fort Bragg. That's right. I regret to inform you that the psyop to turn WS classified document leaker into a hero who helped to prevent World War III is well underway. Fort Bragg is where psychological warfare has been taught and weaponized in the U.S. against our enemies, but more recently against us. You know, I've talked about mind war and how psyops and all of that aren't good, but like he's literally just making shit up whole cloth to cry about Fort Bragg. He wasn't at Fort Bragg. You know, and he wasn't giving information to the Russians. This is one of the more Russia weirdos out there who thinks everybody, you know, is working for the Russians. You know, it's nonsensical. Here's an interesting thread, though, and this is what I want everyone to consider, and sadly it took us 50 minutes to get there. Nothing is as it seems. It appears the madness in the Empire's star chambers has been cranked to 11, and they have gone and royally beclowned themselves with this document leak psyop, and make no mistake, a psyop is precisely what we're dealing with here. Not only is it inarguably a psyop, but it is one that must have been conceived at the highest levels of the ruling junta. How do we know this? Because the reaction of all the empire's power apparatus has been tightly coordinated and carefully scripted. Not only that, but the dopes bumbled and provided their patsy with documents whose provenance necessarily traces to 2 siloed sources, DOD and CIA. Larry Johnson talks about this today in a short interview on Judging Freedom. This means the package of documents the adolescent gamer boys are alleged to have been playing with in a dark corner of the internet could only have come from someone with access to both Pentagon and CIA reports. There can't be many people who fall into that category. But what's the play here? Maybe there's a hint in the Ukrainian announcement that because of this damaging leak, their best laid plans have been compromised, and therefore the spring offensive must be delayed until summer. Of course, the real problem is they don't have an army. They went through their first 2 like kegs at a frat party, and they can't seem to conjure up a third. The only way is to keep the party going is to import a new army. That's where my thoughts from last week come to mind again. He's talking about Poland. Could the simplest answer be that the goal of this extraordinarily clumsy psyop is simply to buy time while the empire attempts to cajole, bribe, and coerce a coalition of the willing to rescue the situation? If so, the empire at all costs cult has run amok. So I think that that's a good point. However, I question some of the things that are posited here about the information, the being only coming from a small category of people that would have had access to that. Like I said, I've heard conflicting information that that's not actually true, but it is interesting. So we have a thread here from Kevin Gosala. He says, threat on FBI affidavit in support of persecuting Air National Guard reservist Jack Teixeira under the Espionage Act. So just like they're going after Julian Assange. And of course, like, we're supposed to trust the experts here from the FBI. It says, this is the part of the criminal code governing the handling of classified information by officers, employees, contractors, or consultants of the U.S. government that Teixeira was charged with violating, in addition to a charge under the Espionage Act. 18 U.S. Code Section 1924 carries a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. The Espionage Act carries a maximum sentence of 10 years. Any person prosecuted for a leak in the past 10 to 15 years could have been charged with violating this provision instead of the Espionage Act. Noting that many of the documents had top secret markings, the FBI special agent notes certain photos of the documents posted to Discord contained information from Pentagon briefings for senior military and government officials at Arlington, Virginia. Okay, that's interesting. FBI special agent goes on to allege, based upon an interview with a user who was part of Teixeira's Discord group, that one document contained details about troop movements in the war in Ukraine. The info was classified at the top secret level. It would appear the FBI did not have to use markings on the documents or even clues from photos that Teixeira posted in order to ID him. They subpoenaed Discord and were provided with information from his account as a group administrator, where apparently he included his home address. Teixeira, an Air National Guard reservist, had a top secret security clearance. He was a cyber defense operations journeyman. He also had access to, quote, other highly classified programs that were secret, sensitive compartmentalized information, or SCI. The FBI special agent mentions that, quote, a U.S. government agency, CIA perhaps, checked the logs for certain documents to confirm Teixeira had accessed them in February 2023, approximately 1 day before they were posted in the Discord group. How convenient. Logs for who access documents are just one of many ways the Pentagon and U.S. security agencies can track employees and contractors. They've expanded a quote-unquote insider threat program since Chelsea Manning Bradley released documents to WikiLeaks in 2010. Still, they didn't spot Teixeira. Isn't that interesting? We talked about the insider threat program in my live stream on this. Allegedly, Teixeira used his government computer to search classified intelligence reporting for the word leak on April 6. Oh, that's real convenient. I'm sure he would do that. It isn't why the FBI found him and arrested him, but obviously anyone who is a whistleblower or media source should never, ever do this. In addition, according to a second U.S. government agency, which can monitor certain searches conducted on its classified networks, Teixeira used his government computer to search classified intelligence reporting for the word leak. The first public report regarding the government information appeared on or around April 6. Accordingly, there is reason to believe Teixeira was searching for classified reporting regarding the intelligence community's assessment of the identity of the individual who transmitted classified national defense information to include the government document. I predict Teixeira's attorney will advise him to plead guilty and seek some sort of plea agreement to reduce his sentence to federal prison. So, it's just very interesting. Like, why would he search that? You know, it would be... I just think that's ridiculous, and it just seems really convenient for them. So I've included the full complaint here against him. I will include this in the video description, of course. This is Joshua Reed. He says the Pentagon leaker story does not add up or make much sense. It is not uncommon for a low ranking to have a TS/SCI clearance, although access to information would be done with the need to know. Jack was a cyber transport systems specialist. Basically, he is an IT network engineer working on the hardware for communications and data systems. At his level, junior enlisted, his responsibilities would have been very limited. The access to highly classified battle plans and documentation would be highly improbable. He would have literally had to hack DoD systems to access classified information. The fact that we do know is he had actual classified documents, hard copies of documents, most likely reserved for battalion commanders and above. He did not have a need to know for this level of classified information. If he by chance was the security coordinator for his installation and handled the classified information, taking it in and out of a secured area, then there is a possibility he could have pulled this off, but it is highly unlikely that an Air National Guard base would have this type of intel. Highly unlikely. The information leaked from what we are hearing is gathered from multiple intelligence agencies, some hard copied, some digital. To pull this level of classified information from multiple sources, hard copies and all, is almost impossible with the system set in place after Snowden, unless we find out this kid was somehow using Zipper to take this information, print it off without being detected, which is close to impossible. Then he is most likely not the leaker, but instead the fall guy. My thoughts are this: Jack Teixeira did not unlive himself. That's disturbing. Okay, continuing here. How long before imperial media mouthpieces start explicitly suggesting a relationship between G enthusiasts and treason? Good question. And he is replying to this Reuters piece. Continuing on, here's the New York Times article talking about the FBI arrest of him from yesterday. I thought this was interesting. Bellingcat analyses generally smell of parallel construction. Once Jack Teixeira is identified and domestic photos of Teixeira home obtained, the match between tabletop background in leak photo and domestic scene is solid match. But does photo in itself lead to Teixeira? No, it doesn't. And that's the point. How did they figure it out? It's just so bizarre. They were given that information. Here's linked to the New York Times article. They leave out the most important part: how they got Teixeira's name in the first place. Unbelievable. The New York Times led toward Jack Teixeira. Yeah. Files. Yeah, okay, sure. Very interesting. And then finally, I just wanted to close out on this piece from the Washington Post. It's strange. He's from a patriotic family and allegedly leaked secrets online. The suspect in the breach of dozens of classified documents took on a persona seemingly at odds with his military career. As a newly minted member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard returned home from training, his mother took to her flower shop's Facebook page to express pride in his accomplishments. Jack is on his way home today. Tech school complete, ready to start his career in the Air National Guard, said the Post, dated June 3rd, 2021. It was accompanied by a photograph of a patriotic-themed balloon tied to a mailbox emblazoned "Welcome Home." Patriotic zeal appeared common around Airman First Class Jack Teixeira, 21, who had followed in the footsteps of numerous family members to join the military. Teixeira, slim and boyish in photographs taken in his blue dress uniform, had been assigned to manage and troubleshoot computers and communication systems for the 102nd Intelligence Wing at Otis Air National Guard Base, according to the Air Air Force. Investigators now think there's a more troubling, reckless side, and the fallout is only beginning. FBI agents clad in body armor carrying rifles swept across the Teixeira family residence in Dighton, Massachusetts on Thursday, arresting Teixeira and charging him with unauthorized removal of classified national defense information. Attorney General Merrick Garland said in brief remarks at the Injustice Department. Video captured by a news helicopter circling over the family home showed him at one point holding his hands behind his head under the watch of law enforcement personnel before he was led away wearing red athletic shorts and a t-shirt. Teixeira has been identified as the suspected leaker of hundreds of photographs of highly classified military documents that have proliferated across the internet over the past week. The leak, probably the military's largest in at least a decade, has revealed secrets about everything from gaps in Ukrainian air defenses to the specifics of how the U.S. spies on its allies and partners. Teixeira, who used online handles that include Jack the Dripper and Excalibur Effect, posted the images to Discord, a chat platform popular with gamers. People familiar with the case said. Some Discord members showed the Washington Post video of Teixeira shouting R and A slurs before firing a rifle. Like some others interviewed for the story, they spoke on condition of anonymity. Right. The arrest appeared to bring an end to a week-long mystery that both law enforcement and internet sleuths had attempted to unravel. Yeah, sure. The photos of documents posted online included a trail of clues with items in the background that included Gorilla Glue, a Boston Red Sox hat, and hunting magazines. So, nothing strange about that. Attempts to reach Teixeira and members of his family were unsuccessful. The crisis has blindsided the Pentagon, which did not become aware until last week that secrets had for weeks been spreading online. That's not true, though, and forced the Biden administration to have awkward conversations with allies and partners about explosive issues. Oh, they were, held accountable. That's what happened. The FBI did not descend on the Teixeira home until after the Post revealed numerous details about the still anonymous leaker Wednesday night, and after the New York Times followed up on Thursday by naming, doxing, and outing him. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin commended the Injustice Department and the clowns for their swift action in connection with this investigation and pledged full DOD support for it. If this kid is innocent and he's being just set up as the fall guy and the patsy, he's screwed, and I feel very bad for him. The Pentagon continues to assess the damage to national security that has occurred because of the leak. Right. While Teixeira was relatively inexperienced in the military, he had access to highly classified military intelligence through a DoD computer network known as the Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communications System, said a U.S. official familiar with the matter. The system would have allowed Teixeira to read and potentially print classified documents, though there are guidelines to handle those in accordance with the law. Teixeira was mobilized for federal active duty last fall, said Nahaku McFadden, a spokesperson for the National Guard Bureau. It is not uncommon for troops and the National Guard to receive such orders to fill the need for specialized jobs, but since he was on active duty at the time of the alleged disclosures, he is subject to additional punishment under the military justice system. One friend described Teixeira in an interview as patriotic, a devout Catholic, and libertarian with an interest in firearms and doubts about America's future. The friend said he met Teixeira before 2020 on a Discord server mainly focused on guns and politics, and bonded over their shared interest in Glock and Catholicism. Later, the friend joined a new Discord server Teixeira started called Thug Shaker Central, which became home to a group of about 24 people, including many teenagers. Teixeira was a pretty normal guy outside the server, said the friend who eventually met him in person. He had a slight temper and was more of a mentor than a leader. The friend recalled Teixeira started sharing classified documents on the server last year during the war, which he said, which he saw as a depressing battle between two countries that should have more in common than keeping them apart. Sharing the documents was meant to educate people who he thought were his friends and could be trusted from the propaganda swirling outside, the friend said. They all agreed never to share the documents because it could harm U.S. interests. I was of the opinion some of these kids were prone to run their mouths because they spent too much time online, but I was ignored, said the friend, who added he tried to stay out of such discussions. It was pretty obnoxious to see kids who grew up in the suburbs argue about a conflict an ocean away. Around half of the server's members were kids in their basements playing video games, while the other half were G enthusiasts, the friend said. Recent claims by others who were on the server, some of its members were Russian and Ukrainian, were pure fabrication, the friend said. One member, pretending to be a Russian naval officer, actually lived in Kentucky and was kicked out. It was only supposed to be keeping kids informed about real-world issues, the friend said. Another member of the server eventually shared the documents on another server, leading to their spreading across the internet. Teixeira didn't seek to undermine national security, but hoped to teach younger kids a better view of the issues the only way he knew how. He loved America, but simply didn't feel confident in its future. At the end of the day, he would side with this country over any other. Other members of Teixeira's server have showed the post video of him doing inappropriate things and said he referenced government raids at Ruby Ridge and Waco, events with deep resonance among anti-government extremists. The name of the Discord server itself comes from a meme. It's so lame that they showed the media that. These people called themselves his friends. Wow. The friend said it was hard to assess Teixeira's true feelings given, quote, how many layers of irony that server was in, unquote. Dark jokes got more laughs, he said, but Teixeira was a pretty basic brand Catholic. He's a good person that trusted the wrong people, in my opinion. For the family, the alleged spilling of secrets appears at odds with decades of military service. The airman's stepfather, Thomas, retired after a 34-year military career as a master sergeant from the same unit in a 2019 ceremony at Joint Base Cape Cod, according to public records and photos posted online. The mother, Dawn, for years worked for nonprofit organizations supporting veterans, including the Massachusetts Military Heroes Fund and Home of Our Troops, and briefly for the Massachusetts Department of Veteran Services, according to her LinkedIn profile. In 2017, she focused on her flower business. Teixeira was taken into custody at the single-family home owned by his mother on a tree-lined street in a rural neighborhood. A profile for Teixeira on Steam, another online site popular with gamers, includes a profile image of a man holding a rifle that crops out the head. Teixeira used the handle The Excalibur Effect on the site and featured a famous but unattributed quote, beware the quiet man, for while others speak, he watched, and while others act, he plans, and when they finally rest, he strikes. Oh, how convenient and interesting, right? So anyways, that wraps up this video. That's all the information that I've been able to put together so far, and sort of the questions that I have as I'm watching this whole thing happen, I guess. I think that many questions are still unanswered, but I'm interested to hear what you all think of this. Do you guys think that this is real? Do you guys think that this kid is the leaker? Do you think that he's just a patsy? Do you think the entire thing is some kind of psyop? And is it, aimed at the American people or foreign audiences? Is it meant to kind of trick Russia into doing something? Or do we think that that was maybe the point? Or is it designed to enhance censorship? Is it so they can push forth the Restrict Act and all of this other nonsense? Or could it have multiple purposes, right? Sometimes when they do these deep events or whatever you want to call it, there's multiple agendas happening at once. So it could have multiple reasons. Maybe it is to demonize a certain kind of person that we already know was being purged from Joe Biden's regime. It's just all very interesting, and it's all very strange. I think at the end of the day, we are all left with more questions than answers. So anyways, that's all I have for today, and I hope you guys have a good weekend. Whee!